Hi friends, welcome to today's session. So in this video we are going to talk about the common mistakes you can avoid while using story points. So let's get started. So here in this video I have taken 12 common mistakes that you can avoid when you are using story points, and if you follow these then I can promise that your estimation will become more and more mature and accurate over a period of time. So if you don't know what story points are and how do we do the estimation with the story points, the link is there in the description box. You can follow that video, and after that you can come back to this video. So mistakes to avoid when using story points. So the first is equating story points to just complexity, uncertainty or value. So you have to understand that the story points are about efforts, the amount of work that is required to be done as part of a particular requirement. Complexity, uncertainty, risk, these are the factors that influence the effort, but each of these is not alone to determine the effort. So you always have to focus upon all of these things while you are deriving an estimation. Then second is translating story points to hours. This is the most common mistakes done by, I would say, 70% of the teams in the organizations, wherein they translate the story points to hours. So the reason that we are not estimating in hours is because, for example, if you ask two developers about developing a web page, both will give you different hours or the duration that it's going to take, because it depends upon the skill set of those developers. It depends upon the underlying framework that's being used. But the story point doesn't demand all of that. So when you translate the story points to hours, you stop benefiting from the speed of relative estimation. You start working in hours and risk giving your commitment. So you will have, or it will provide you with a false sense of accuracy as you reduce a story point with a time range of, for example, 10 hours or 15 hours. So it will really be more difficult for you to reach to an agreement when you are estimating a requirement together with your team. You will not be able to reach to a consensus because each participant will vote based upon the skills they possess that are required to do the job. So it's always better that you have a reference backlog item or a user story based upon which you will estimate all the other user stories and never translate the story points to hours. Then next is about the averaging the story points. So generally most of the teams I've seen, they follow this planning poker to estimate to do the estimation in form of story points. So generally what happens is that if half of the team says, okay, this requirement is worth 3 story points, and probably the other half says this requirement is worth 5 story points. So what Scrum Masters end up doing in certain cases that they average it out and put it as 4 story points. This is wrong. You should not do this, as it's once again attempts to provide a false sense of accuracy. So whenever we are doing the story point estimation, the point is not to be 100% accurate. The point is to be accurate enough to plan ahead of the time, to foresee the challenges that might come ahead of the time. Okay, but it's not to be 100% accurate. So never ever average the story points. Initiate a discussion. Try to find out that why certain people rate it as 3, why others rate it as 5. Try to bring the team to a level where they all can reach to a consensus. All right, then the next point is adjusting story point estimates of the issues during the sprint. So when the team starts working on the issue, neither the team members nor the scrum master nor the product owner should adjust the story point estimate. Even if you feel that in the middle of the sprint this estimate was completely inaccurate. If the estimate was inaccurate, then it will be part of the final sprint velocity, and it's completely normal that estimations can be off sometime. That is why we say that it takes a couple of sprints to reflect the correct sprint velocity for the team. Okay. Then next is never story point bugs. So whatever functionality you have developed previously, a bug could be a possible glitch in that functionality, right? So a bug related to an issue in the sprint should not be story pointed, because it was part of original estimation. And when we do the estimation for the story points, we do the estimation considering that we will do the development with the best approach. We will have the automated test cases in place. We will do all kind of testing that is required to get the job done, and we will produce a high quality deliverable. So we never consider that our solution is going to produce the bugs. So the estimation was originally part of the requirement that you worked upon. So never ever story point the bugs, because if you are estimating the bugs, then probably the original story that you estimated as 5, and then you estimated this bug as 3, for example, then you are again going you are again providing a false sense of accuracy here. So never ever do that. Then next point is adding story points to small tasks. A small spike for investigating something should be just time boxed. If it is clear that it will take 4 hours to do or 5 hours to do, there is no need to bring any story points in there. Okay. Then adjusting reference product backlog items each sprint. PBIs is product backlog item. So when a team adjusts the reference PBIs each sprint, then the velocity of different sprints is no longer comparable. So you have to keep your reference PBIs fixed, and those should be the one that the entire team resonates with. As I mentioned in my previous videos before, it should not be the smallest one. It's not necessarily to be the smallest one or the biggest one. It should be something that the entire team understands. So when you keep on adjusting the reference PBIs, then the velocity of different sprints is no longer comparable. You lose out on the information, the historical information you can no longer use to plan ahead. Now, story pointing unfinished issues. So when you are moving an unfinished product backlog item to the next sprint, it's not required to re-estimate that. The reason is that issue will still be open, and the estimates that you have given for that issue will not be reflected in your velocity because the issue is still open. And at a later point in time, for example during the next sprint, when the issue gets resolved, then it will automatically be taken into account as a part of that sprint velocity. So never ever do a re-estimation, even if it is the case wherein for example you have estimated a story as 8 story points, and then you end up doing everything. It's just that some kind of testing and documentation is pending, and that moves on to the next, that makes the issue move on to the next sprint without the closure. Then also please don't do the estimate, because I have personally seen some scrum masters, what they do is they close that requirement, and they create a separate requirement for the next sprint and estimate it as just 1 or 2, and just put in the things like testing or documentation. So that's not right, because previously you estimated the story as 8 considering all these aspects. Now you close it, so you know the amount of work that you estimated is done, and now you are again having another one which we estimated as 2 or 3 to for the testing and documentation. That is again, you are, you know, with respect to a story, you are providing a kind of false sense of accuracy. So that product backlog item can never be used in future for references, that this is the estimate that we have given for this, and this is the amount of time that is going to take. So never ever do that. Then adjusting story point estimation, because a specific developer will work on it. So yes, this is also one of the very common problems I have seen in many teams. So you have to understand that whenever we are estimating a user story, we are doing a relative estimation, and that is done by all the team members involved. So you cannot keep anyone out of the estimation process. Team members story point the product backlog item, reach an agreement on the estimate in the planning poker session or whatever tool you are using. A product backlog item may be 3 story points for a senior developer, but 8 story points for a junior developer. So team should reach on an agreement of how much work it represents for the team and use this. You should not be adjusting the story points because a specific person will do the job. Maybe by the time the team starts working on it, the senior developer is working on something else, and maybe the junior developer has to take over. Then again you will face difficulty, and then you will try to land up into another situation where you are adjusting the story points during the sprint that we have talked about already. Okay, then next is never adjust reference PBI. So firstly we talk about that you keep on adjusting, and the second, the point that we are talking about now is that you are not adjusting it at all. For example, when you created a reference product backlog item and you start doing the estimations with your team, you have a different set of team, and now you are having, you know, 3 new team members. So as I keep on saying, that your reference product backlog item or your baseline should be the one that entire teams resonate with, that everyone understands. So in such cases where you have new team members joining in, you should adjust your reference product backlog item. Then conforming to the expert in the room. So generally what I've seen is that when we are doing the planning poker, people don't show up their cards, or people don't show up their estimates until and unless there is one person in the team who kind of is always sure and who always show up his cards first. So we should never do that. We should never rely on someone else's estimate. And the person who is sure, the person who is an expert, should also not try to influence others in the team, you know, by showcasing his estimates first, or by speaking on the calls first. So this should never be the case. So how we can avoid this situation is, one is that you can make use of that online planning poker tool, Point in Poker. So in that you can make some specific settings wherein no other team member can see the estimates of what others in the team are putting in. That's one way of doing it. Or another way, if you are doing it, if your team is, local and it's not distributed, you are sitting in the room and doing it. So you let the expert elaborate on what specific work needs to be done as part of user this requirement. Create steps out of it, define subtask out of it, and then have rest of the team estimate without the expert. But I would still suggest you that even if you are doing it in a room, then please make use of some online available tools wherein no other person in the team is aware about what others are keying in as their estimates, because the second situation is something wherein we are leaving out an important team member. So that I would not prefer, but it's up to you to decide. Okay, then next is not discussing incorrectly story pointed issues in retrospective. So whenever you feel that for a particular user story the estimation was completely off the track, was completely inaccurate, then it's important to discuss this issue and try to learn that why the estimation was inaccurate, uh, what more came in apart from what we discussed during the product backlog refinement session. So these things, if you do these things, it will help you to make it will make your future estimations kind of more accurate, right? So always try and discuss the issues wherein the estimations were completely off the track during your retrospective, and consider the inputs that you get from team during your next product backlog refinement session. So that's all about the mistakes you need to avoid when you are using the story points. That's mainly it from my side for this session. Thank you for listening to me, and see you all in the next video.